Hello there and welcome to Star Wars Comics in Canon, your guide to the wider Star Wars canon through the comic book lens. And to take you on this journey, I'm your host, Mike Burton. And so brings episode 48. So I hope you guys really enjoyed last week's episode. That was my Light of the Jedi book review, the first, in air quotes, adult book in the High Republic era. It's very, very good and short, but go and check it out. It's spoiler free, and it's worth listening to, especially if you're on the fence about collecting it or reading it or listening to, I think there's an Audible thing of it. However you want to consume it, go check out the podcast, and it gives you a lot of background information on the High Republic, a little bit about the comics, and then also of the book itself, so make sure you check that out. But this week I am tackling more comics in the main run of Star Wars. So the main run of Star Wars comics, obviously they are 75 issues in total, and this week I am tackling issues 44 to 49. So it's a 6-part arc, also known as Volume 8 of the Star Wars comics, and the tagline is the Mutiny at Mon Cala. Now, the writer for this is Kieron Gillen, the artist is Salvador Larroca, and the colour artist is Guru EFX. Now, what's quite interesting about this one is that it's got some parallel plot points to Darth Vader issues 13 to 18, which is of the 2017 run by Charles Soule, which I have not yet tackled on this show. But if you have read the Darth Vader comics of the Charles Soule ones, which I highly recommend, Volume 3, The Burning Seas, issues 13 to 18, that actually tackles basically what happened on Mon Cala 20-ish years before the events of this one, which is quite an interesting sort of take on it and things. And at some point in the future I will be tackling the second Darth Vader run. It's just at the moment I'm doing obviously main run of Star Wars, the Age of series, mini series, and then also the Dr. Aphra series. So this main run of Star Wars is going to go on for quite a while longer. There's, as I said, 75 issues, so there's going to be at least another 4 episodes I think. But on top of that there's also the Dr. Aphra things that are ongoing. But when I've done the Target Vader comics, which I think are the next mini-series I'm tackling, after that it's going to be probably the Kanan Comics, because there's a 12-issue, I wouldn't even call it a mini-series, maybe a moderate series. It's a 12-issue series of Kanan, who is a character from Star Wars Rebels, and there's some very interesting parts in that, especially about Order 66. So I will be tackling them at some point in the future. Just don't worry, guys. But I just want to flag that up just in case you guys have read those other ones. It may also be worth checking out the episode I did, number 7, tackling the comic Star Wars Allegiance. That was a 4-part mini-series released as a journey to the Rise of Skywalker, and it basically introduces the character of Aftab Ackbar, which is Admiral Ackbar's son, and it goes into some of the information about that. And the events are set after The Last Jedi, so it goes into sort of more detail and a bit of closure about his death in The Last Jedi. But yeah, so the quintessential things for this is also Star Wars Clone Wars Season 4, I think it's the first 3 episodes, is an arc of, and the first episode is called Water War, so it's the first episode of Season 4, and it's all about this city. It's about the planet of Mon Cala, and the Jedi go down there, and there's like a big sort of civil war going on between the Quarren and the Mon Calamari, and the Mon Calamari is what Admiral Ackbar is, species-wise. The Quarren are kind of slightly more squid-like. They have sort of triangular heads and tentacles coming out of their sort of mouth area, but they both live on Mon Cala. And there's a whole Civil War episode about that. So they have a civil war in the Clone Wars, which seemingly gets resolved. And there's a character in this that shows up who is called King Lee Char. Now, he's a prince in the Clone Wars. So you actually get to see in Clone Wars Prince Lee Char. Then you get to see in the Darth Vader comics how Mon Cala responded to the Empire. And then you get to see in these comics how the Empire responded to the Rebellion. And then in Allegiance, you get to see how they sort of respond to the First Order and things. So Mon Cala is a place that is quite important in a lot of aspects in the Star Wars canon, but in the films doesn't really get touched upon very much. Obviously everyone knows Admiral Ackbar, it's a trap, everyone knows that, and a lot of people recognise that there is a person of his own species in the Rise of Skywalker, and that is Aftab, his son. So just quite a few cool little connections here and there that I thought I wanted to point out before we get started. So with this comic, when it was released, so issue 44 was released in March 2018, issue 49 was released in June 2018, and the trade paperback collection was released in August 2018. So without further ado, here is the crawl. Part 1, Mutiny at Mon Cala. It is a period of rebuilding in the galaxy. The Death Star has been destroyed, as has the Imperial orbital drill on Jeddah. A spark of hope has emerged among the rebellion. Recently, Rebel leaders Princess Leia, Luke Skywalker, and Han Solo have been in the search of a new base of operation as they continue to fight against the Galactic Empire's tyrannical reign. New alliances are formed every day. So this set of comics is still set within the first year after A New Hope. The next arc, which I'll go into a little bit at the end here, which starts with issue 50 of Star Wars, that is set 1 year after the Battle of Yavin. So there's 3 years between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, and then 1 year between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and this is at the tail end of the first year. So the comic starts with the usual gang: Han, Leia, Luke, Chewie, 3PO and R2-D2. They're all there on Mon Cala, but Mon Cala is primarily a water world, but they're on this sort of landmass that Han says is a protected area. It's basically a nature reserve. We have them in England. I'm pretty certain you guys have them in America and across the world, but it's just a protected area that no one really touches, so the wildlife can thrive by itself. So they're there, and they're also there with Ackbar as well, waiting for someone. Now, a little bit more information about Ackbar. So at the start I told you about his son Aftab, his species is Mon Calamari. Ackbar's first name is Gial, which looks like Guile, but I don't know if it's Gil or Gil. I don't know if it's some sort of pun to do with Ackbar, but it's Gial, Guile, I don't know. I'm only going to call him Ackbar, or Admiral Ackbar, so don't need to worry about that in the future. Obviously, I said Ackbar dies in Last Jedi, and he was approximately 86 years old when he dies in Last Jedi, which is pretty mental, because he was born at some point before 52 years before the Battle of Yavin. So in the Phantom Menace, which is 32 years before the Battle of Yavin, which is 32 to 33 years before the events of this comic, Ackbar was at least 20 years old at that point. So he's quite an old dude. He also does appear in that Clone Wars arc that I mentioned in Season 4, Episode 1, Water War, but his first appearance was in Return of the Jedi, where he has that classic line, "It's a trap." So while the crew are on this reserve waiting for someone, a gentleman named Grand Admiral Urtia appears, and he talks to Leia. Now, Urtia is another Mon Calamari. However, while Ackbar is a sort of reddish gold, well, he kind of looks like a goldfish, Ackbar, so there's a kind of reddish hue to him, whereas Urtia has a blue hue to him. So Urtia is talking to Leia because Leia's trying to convince the Mon Calamari to join the rebellion because their ships are renowned of being amazing. And a little tidbit here is in The Last Jedi, when Admiral Holdo does the Holdo maneuver and she, goes to light speed and then it fractures and splinters, and there's probably one of the coolest scenes in all of Star Wars, and it's definitely one of the highlights of the film. And, she does that moment where she goes to light speed and it destroys a lot of the First Order. That is actually in the ship called the Radis, which is named after the Mon Calamari in Rogue One, who dies at the Battle of Scarif. And their ships, specifically the Radis, had some experimental shielding. So Mon Calamari, they have really good shields and really good tech for their stuff because their ships have to be able to survive not only space but also the pressures of underwater as well, because they normally keep their ships hidden underwater and things and then fly them out of the water into space and whatnot. So they seem to have certain parts of them are more suited for certain things, and one of the things is their experimental shields. And one of the things that gets flagged up is, why didn't loads of people do the Holdo maneuver? When you're in a spaceship and it's about to get destroyed, why not jump to light speed at someone? And I think the idea is that probably a lot of people don't think of that, but also, in universe it is that because of the Radis, it being the ship that it was, experimental shield, all sorts of other bits, the chances of that happening again are incredibly, incredibly slim. There's some sort of figure of like 1 million or some stupid amount to 1 of that actually happening and succeeding, which is obviously great. It did work, but just for clarity, if people want to know, that's why they don't work, and Mon Calamari ships Mon Cala ships are really, really good. You'll notice them in the original trilogy. They are the ones that are slightly more rounded. They're kind of, it's almost if you get a straight line and you kind of draw little bumps and hills on the top and then the same on the bottom. There's like lots of little circles that kind of connect them together, whereas, a lot of the other ships, are very pointy or square-like and things. So you can see them in the original trilogy. So, as I said, while Urtia is talking to Leia while she's trying to convince him to join the rebellion, an Imperial scout ship flies past and notices, and then shoots the transport that the gang got onto. Now, Han is complaining a bit that he isn't using the Falcon, but obviously in this scenario, it's good that he didn't have the Falcon, because that would have been destroyed. Han says to the guys, well, I'll go talk to the Imperials, I know what I'm doing. And he goes over there and tries to sort of distract them and things, and they're not really taking the bait fully, so he throws a thermal detonator at them, and then they run away. A lot of the imps get killed, imps being Imperials, a lot of them get killed, but some of them survive, and then the whole gang have to run through this forest, and there's mention of in the forest there's like plants that can eat people, like carnivorous plants and whatnot, and so they're running through the woodland. After some of the shooting and a couple of cool panels, they do get the other side of the woodland. They come out and they get to a boat. Now when they get there, Leia is still trying to convince Urtia to give the rebels a fleet of Mon Cala ships, basically begging him to join, and he says, well, Radis is dead because of your cause. He was one of our best. And Ackbar's there as well, trying to, convince Urtia and saying, like, well, I left for the rebellion. I could inspire people. And Urtia says that more people trust Urtia than are inspired by Ackbar joining the rebellion, which is quite an interesting way of looking at things. And so the gang basically leave on this ship, and then I think they eventually get to the Falcon and stuff, and then they go back to where the rebels are currently hiding. And when they're there, Leia contacts Queen Trios because she wants to find some information on how to get a king. And that's where that comic ends. So for Clarity Trios, you should read the Darth Vader comics or listen to my episodes on the Darth Vader comics, because I think it's the second to last one. So volume 3, I think is the show to run war. That is detailing how Queen Trios met Vader. And then in I think it's the last arc of the main Star Wars run. So the ones with the Rogue One sequel, I call it, which was about 4 or 5 weeks ago now, that specifically has them meeting and Trios forming an alliance. So Trios is basically in the Empire in a sense, because her planet of Shooter-Run got basically taken with a Vader's fist, and so she's serving Vader, but she's feeding information to the rebellion to help them out and things. So the next comic starts, you've got Luke, Han and Chewie in a cantina sort of chatting and things, and there's a joke going on that Luke doesn't really drink anything apart from milk. And then someone touches Luke on the shoulder, says, "Watch your 6, rookie." Luke force pushes him a little bit, and then he's like, "Whoa there, guess you don't need a wingman anymore." And who is it? It's Wedge Antilles, who's one of the most underrated characters in Star Wars, who is amazing. So they have a nice little catch up and stuff. And while that's happening, Leia is at high command, so she's with the rebellion leaders trying to work out what to do. And also, if you look closely in one of these panels, you actually get to see Hera Syndulla and Zeb from Star Wars Rebels. Or if you've played Star Wars Squadrons, I believe that Hera is in that as well. She does pop up in a few other things, including the Dr. Aphra comics. In fact, she's in the Dr. Aphra comics, the arc that I tackled last time. So it would be 3 weeks ago, I think, where you get to see Dr. Aphra interacting with Hera Syndulla, which is quite interesting. So basically, Leia confirms that Urtia would not lead a mutiny on Mon Cala, so the best thing to do would be to free the true king, Lee Char. Now I mentioned, Lee Char, he shows up in the Darth Vader 2017 run, volume 3, issues 13 to 18, and was also in Clone Wars as a prince, season 4, episodes 1 to 3. They will discuss a few ideas and things, and they essentially speak about they've located the king because Trios provided them with the information of where he is, but to get to him you need a biosignature to even get through the doors. And the problem is that if the Moff goes missing at any point, immediately it will all get revoked and then the whole plan will fall flat. So they basically need to find the area, get into the prison, and then also have the biosignature of the Moff without anyone finding out that he is left, while also managing to get in all the other ways as well. They're trying to work out how to do this, and a gentleman called Draven has an idea of how to help. Basically, he says that there's an asset they need to extract from Dex Acquisitions. They're basically going to sell this asset to the Empire and things, and Draven says to go get it. Now, for clarity, Draven may be a name that's familiar to you guys. If you saw how he looked, the artwork in this looks just like the actual actor who plays him. He is in Rogue One. He is actually the one who tells Andor to kill Galen Erso. He appears in some other Star Wars comics a little bit as well. He kind of pops up here and there. He's probably going to be in the Cassian Andor series that's coming out on Disney Plus at some point. The prequel series to Rogue One, basically. But with him, he is quite a harsh commander, I'd say. He's willing to take, the greater good approach to kill someone to save, loads of more people and things. And that's what he tries to get Cassian to do in Rogue One. And he's also the one that basically puts forward the bombing of Edu, which obviously is the thing that kills Galen Erso in the end when Cassian chooses not to shoot him. So he's a character. He appears there and there. He's quite important. But if you can't remember him, no biggie. It cuts back to Luke in the cantina with the gang, and there's a couple of pilots that meet him. There's one called Hobby and one called Zev, and they meet Luke. Hobby is a big fan, and he mentions that Hera Syndulla has actually been training them, which is shown in the Aphra comic. You get to see Hera training some people. Now, I had to look this up because I recognised the name Hobby, and I was like, I'm sure he's shown up somewhere before, and I was right. So Hobby's real name is actually Derek Clivian, and he's in Star Wars Rebels, and he actually defects with Wedge Antilles. There's an episode of Star Wars Rebels where they're sort of Sabine Wren breaks into an Imperial Academy and tries to recruit some defectors, and she manages to recruit Hobby as well as Wedge. And also, Hobby is in Empire Strikes Back. He is actually one of the people who crashes his snowspeeder into the AT-ATs. So on Hoth in Empire Strikes Back, the Cold Ice Planet, the walkers, as they're called, the big scary walker things, they're shooting out when they're trying to wrap up their legs and things with the snowspeeders. Hobby actually crashes his snowspeeder into an AT-AT. I believe he crashes into the sort of bridge of it, the sort of head area, and manages to take one of those things out when his ship is damaged. And then Zev, his surname is Sineska, and he is actually the one who found Han and Luke in Empire Strikes Back. So when you have it so that when Han goes out to find Luke, and then, he finds Luke, but he's basically passing out, he has to open a Tauntaun and leave Luke in there. When that happens in the morning, when they're kind of waving about and there's some snowspeeders flying about trying to locate them, the guy who finds them is Zev Sineska, which is quite cool. I will unfortunately say he also dies in Empire Strikes Back because that film has a lot of death in it. But silver lining, they don't pop up in this comic anymore, so you don't have to feel too sad about it. And the conversation in the cantina sort of goes here, there and everywhere. I'm not going to get into all the details, but at one point Luke recalls the dead wingmen from A New Hope. So he just lists loads of names and things, including Porkins, but he also mentions Biggs. And obviously Biggs Darklighter is one of Luke's best friends, especially when he's on Tatooine. And it just shows he's quite somber about it. And Han's like, come on, cheer up. We need to get over this. And then Leia appears and says, we've got the mission. So it cuts to where the Dex Acquisitions Depot is on a planet called Mayor Ain, which I couldn't find anywhere else in the canon. And they're basically these kidnappers. They're on this ship and things, and they get a contact from someone called Violent Bok. And apparently this Violent Bok Wookiee bounty hunter has caught Leia. And they're like, that can't be right, they haven't got Princess Leia. And then they see a video of a Wookiee arm pushing Leia and her saying, let go of me, you hairy brute. The kidnappers are like, okay, cool, let's open up our ship, turn off the security and things, and let them come in. Then, it turns out, if you guys couldn't tell, Violet Bok is Chewie. So they go in there, and they basically manage to kill or incapacitate all of the kidnappers and things. And there's a funny little comment from Chewie to Leia, and Leia's like, no, I think Violet Bok was a very good name. I don't know what they're talking about, because the kidnappers mock the name Violet Bok. I just think it's so cute that Chewie thinks of this name that he thinks is really badass and cool, and then some kidnappers are like, that's a lame name, and Leia has to be like, don't worry, Chewie, it's okay. That's a really good name. It's like, he's like, at this point, he's like, what, 100... No, I think he's about 200 odd years old at this point. So it's just like, he's older than all of the people put together, and he still needs the sort of childlike gratification, and it's just, I love it. I love Chewie, he's the best. So anyway, they manage to incapacitate all these kidnappers and things, they manage to break in and whatnot, and they get to the cell of where the asset is. They open the door, and Bail Organa is there. So Bail Organa is Leia's dad. And Leia walks straight up to Bail Organa and punches him square in the face, yelling, my father is dead. If you try any of your mind games again, Tunga, I'll make sure that you live long enough to regret it. And then the last sort of page just shows this Clawdite on the floor saying, you can't blame a shape changer for having a little bit of fun. And Leia says, I do. Welcome to the rebellion. Shoots him with a stun gun, and then Chewie picks him up and they head off. So for clarity, basically, yeah, there's a shapeshifter. And Clawdite, that isn't a name that is used very frequently, but it is common enough in Star Wars, and the most famous Clawdite, I would say, is Zam Wesell. Now, in Attack of the Clones, episode 2, they're trying to kill Padme, and, there's Palpatine appoints Dooku, and I think Dooku gets Jango to do it, and then Jango gets Zam to do it. It's a very weird level of command, especially because bounty hunters, to my knowledge, don't really pass on many jobs and things, but still, Zam Wesell, she is a shapeshifter. And she's the one who, she looks like a normal human. Obi-Wan and Anakin chase her. They fly through sort of Coruscant and things, and then eventually she crashes, and then they chase her into a bar and whatnot. And then they get her outside, they're trying to ask her who she works for, and then Jango shoots a poison dart, and it kills her. When she is killed, and also in certain scenes of the chase, when she looks behind, her face changes into the Clawdite, again, which is, green-skinned, quite gaunt cheeks, big yellow eyes, quite like cat eyes or snake eyes, with the pupil is more of a line than an actual circle. So that's what a Clawdite looks like, and they're just shapeshifters in Star Wars, and they're quite sought after. And the reason that Leia says Tunga is because Tunga is his name. I'm also very happy because when I read this the first time round, back, in 2018, because I've got the individual collected issues, I'm so glad they did not end it with her opening the door and seeing Bail Organa there, because that would have been such a cop-out cliffhanger. I'm really glad they just did it for like a page. I'm like, well, and then, afterwards they're like, clearly not, rather than you making people wait a month, because it's just like, there's no way, And just for clarity, guys, Bail Organa 100% died on Alderaan. He was there with his wife, Breha Organa, and in the book, Certain Point of View, there is a story from their point of view being on Alderaan and then seeing the blast from the Death Star come by. And obviously then you get a few seconds, but it's quite a beautiful story and very sad. So if you want to read something that's quite sad, read that Certain Point of View story. So the next issue, number 46, it starts with Leia confirming that Tunga is a Clawdite with a reputation, and mentions quite a few things that he's kind of vaguely famous for doing. And then it shows on Mon Cala there is an opera playing at the Mon Caladrome. So the plan is the gang need to get Moff, who is called Tan Nubi. For clarity, Moff is his rank. They need to get the Moff Tan Nubi for his biomarkers. So the idea is that Tunga is going to impersonate him and be at the opera. And I think the opera's like 5 hours long or something. So he has to basically just sit there quietly looking like Moff watching this Mon Cala opera. And Han and Chewie wait in the bathroom, and Luke hides in there as well wearing Stormtrooper gear. And there's a couple of jokes about Luke being short, which is quite fun too. So Luke in Stormtrooper gear is stopping any people going in the bathroom, saying, oh, it's only for the Empire. And then an Imperial shows up, and then he says, oh, it's only for officers. And then an officer shows up, and then he says, oh, it's only for Moffs. And then another Moff shows up, and he's like, and then just lets her in, and then she kind of goes in, and she's looking at Han and Chewie, and like, why is there a Wookiee in the bathroom? And then he basically, I really like it, Han plays it off like drying your hands on a Wookiee is like this new cool thing. It's almost like subtly saying it's a hipster thing of just drying your hands on a Wookiee. And she, after she does it, she's like, oh, that was actually quite nice, and leaves. And it's just like, could you imagine anything cooler than going, well, I mean, I'm not really a fan of opera, I must say, but could you imagine anything cooler than going to like a show and then having a Wookiee in the bathroom and you just dry your hands on the fur? That's hilarious. I love that. So while that's all going on, R2-D2 gets the Moff's drink. He has this really specific favourite drink, so they get him that, and it's drugged. So they take it to him, and he is sat next to Queen Trios. He drinks it, and then after a few minutes, he starts to sweat and feel a bit weird, and then says, excuse me, and then he runs to the toilet. He gets in there and things, the door gets locked, and then Han and Chewie just take him out and pull him out of a vent, which is how they got in there initially. Tunga then becomes Tan Nubi and goes over to where Trios is. While that's happening, Leia leaves C-3PO in charge, and he's like, oh my god, really? Are you really leaving me in charge? And Leia's like, yes, I am, please. Just do a good job. And as that happens, the rebels head to Strokill Prime, which is where the King Lee Char is held. Then, using Tan's biomarker as well as codes they got from Trios, they manage to get onto the planet through the blockade and that sort of thing. They then submerge and come into contact with this giant-looking anglerfish thing, which you would have seen in The Phantom Menace. So the name of this giant fish thing is OP-Sea Killer, that's the species, but the Gungans refer to them as goober fish. And they can grow to about 20 meters long. They show up as, in Phantom Menace, that's where you would have all seen them and things. And then there's a Star Wars Adventures comic, and one of them appears there as well, but I haven't read that myself. So yeah, goober fish or OP-Sea Killer, a 20 meter long giant anglerfish looking thing that has terrifying teeth and is chasing them. And that's where comic number 46 ends. So we're at the halfway mark now, so let's move on to number 47. So Tunga is disguised as Tan Nubi. He, as I said, he arrives and he sits next to Trios. And then C-3PO sort of stands behind him and translates the Mon Cala opera for him. Which there's one little plot hole. I'm like, does the Moff not speak Mon Calamari? I mean, if he doesn't, then that's fine. But would he not have his own translator droid? Maybe they swap the droids out. I don't know. But it just seems a bit odd that, being... If you're like the representative of a certain country or culture, you would have assumed that if they've been there for a little while, they would have learned the language. But then Imperials are, quite up themselves, so maybe not. He goes to the gang who are being chased by the OP-Sea Killer. They're chasing the lights on the sort of submarine they've got thing. And so Luke puts on a scuba suit and he swims out there with his lightsaber and he ignites it and then is getting chased by this absolutely colossal fish thing. Chewie then manages to grab Luke and he turns his lightsaber off when they get a certain distance away, and then they just go back to the sub and the goober fish seems to have been distracted sufficiently and is gone. Then as they're on the submarine or whatever you want to call it, ship, they then approach the prison. Meanwhile, at the opera, there's an intermission halfway through the show, and Tunga then speaks to many different people, and it's just quite a fun little comic where he sort of talks to someone and then 3PO whispers something in his ear and then he says something else and these sort of things. I'm not going to read them out because it doesn't add anything to the plot, but it's a bit of fun. He then eats crisped inferno weed and says it's nice, and Urchia comments to Trios going, that's a bit strange because, you know, when I last gave it to Moff, he literally spat it out. So there's a little bit of suspicion there. Then Tunga, Trios and Urchia return for the second act of the opera, and as that happens, the rebels dock at the prison, using the Moff's face as a security pass. And I quite like it because they literally say, Leia's like, pass the security pass, Chewie, and he just has Moff by the head and just pushes his head into this like little square screen thing and then pulls it apart, and the Moff says something like, oh, this is embarrassing. So the rebels then get into the ship and they stun quite a few troopers and things while Chewie is carrying them off. It's primarily droids on that base because obviously, you know, trying to get through the blockade and getting all the clearance codes, then landing on a planet that is basically completely water, then getting through the planet's natural defenses, which are things like the OPC killer, then getting into the base again and getting through the stormtroopers. The Empire obviously think not a lot of people are going to be coming here, so there's not that much security, which is fair. That's I wouldn't say that's a plot hole at all. I'd say that does make sense. And so because there's lots of droids and things, they just kind of have to wait at certain times and get through and whatnot. And they get to the room that has Lee Char in it. And the comic ends with showing how he looks, and he is on life support machines, and there are lots and lots of wires connecting into him, and he's also got a breather mask thing on. And that's where comic 47 ends. So on to issue number 48, and this one starts with the opera at the Mon Cala, and the show has just ended. So C-3PO tells Tunga that he needs to do something, and Tunga's trying to figure it out, and then C-3PO whispers something in his ear, and he's like, of course. And so as the Moff, he decides to distract everyone and sort of filibuster in a way by reciting a 3-hour-long grand romance play. So he does that with C-3PO, which is fairly amusing, and while all this is going on, Leia is speaking to King Lee Char, attached to all those life support things. And they clearly can't get him out and rally the troops, but they decide they're going to record him. So Han and Luke manage to find this recording camera, where it's a droid, it's a recording camera droid. And while that's happening and people aren't paying full attention to him, the real Moff is in that room with them and things, and he presses like a silent alarm button around the side that people don't notice. And it shows that the Imperials of the prison see that he pressed the button and we're like, wait a minute, well, if the Moff pressed the secret alarm button, maybe the Moff down at Mon Cala, oh god, we need to go check it. So then back on Mon Cala, the recital gets stopped and the Imperials starts like shoot out and things, and there's a Mon Calamari who's controlling the lights, and he says, oh, terrible time for a blackout, and then he turns the lights off, obviously clearly seeing something's going on and trying to get the heroes to escape. So Tunga, 3PO and R2-D2 manage to basically run away. And while that's happening, Lee Char is thanking Leia and speaking to her, and then Imperials get into the room that they're in and just shoot up the whole place. And in the fire, most of the heroes manage to sort of dive to the floor or get out of the way, but Lee Char gets decimated by all these blaster bolts. Just as they leave the room and scrambling away from the stormtrooper shooting at them, Leia grabs the recording, and they all sort of, as I said, they kind of escape. Meanwhile, Tunga and the droids, they hide in like a dressing room, and he changes his appearance to look like a Mon Calamari, and he wears like some garbs and things because there was obviously a big opera play thing going on, so he managed to get some of the wardrobe from that. He disguises the droids and they escape. They manage to leave in the ship that they came in, and then Urchia gets his guards and says, get my guards, we'll go get them essentially. Then while that's happening, the gang back on Stroke Hill Prime in the prison, they manage to escape. There's a bit of shooting, between the stormtroopers and whatnot, but they do manage to eventually escape, and then they meet Tunga and the droids in a cave on the surface. I believe it's basically at that nature reserve place they were at before. So while they're there, they're trying to figure out what the next plan of action is. Urchia shows up with his guards. Now, the guards actually look quite cool. They look a little bit like, if anyone's seen the Alien movies, which I really recommend because they're great, it makes me think of the sort of the mech suit that Sigourney Weaver wears at the end of Aliens, where it kind of looks like that, except it's made out of like crustaceans and things and like hard shells. It just looks quite cool. I just quite admire that. And Urchia basically demands to have the recording. Leia says no, so he stuns her. And then Han and Luke, they give up. Well, Luke is about to fight and Han's like, look, this is one of those moments, we need to walk away, we lost. So they get Leia and, Chewie and the droids and things and Tunga, and they get on the Falcon and they leave. And Urchia says he wants to have some privacy, so he goes to his chambers and things all by himself, he's underwater and all that sort of stuff. He then sends the recording to all Mon Cala ships across all of Moncalla and things. And I just want to read out what it is, because the recording is of King Lichar, and I think it's quite cool and it's not too long, so I'm just going to read that out for you guys. So the message goes out from the Regent in the priority channel, and it says to signal to the ships and things, so all of the Moncalla ships send it to basically every available viewing screen within those own ships. So now I'm going to quote what Lichar says. I am Lichar of Mon Cala, and I am dying, but we are all dying. The question becomes, how do we wish to live with the time we have? What kind of life do we wish to leave for those who follow us? I have been an absent king, and I am ashamed. I wish I could have been with you through this imperial hell. I was with you in my heart. I have never forgotten you. The fleet is Mon Cala's pride. Mon Cala knows the Empire's evil. Their atrocities are burned on our flesh. We know what wrongs they have done, but we can only guess at the horrors they will do next. If we are with them when they do so, all our pride will curdle to shame. It cannot be so. Goodbye, my people. And then just before the recording cuts out, you see the Imperials go in and shoot up the body of Lichar. And while all these things are happening, some Imperials see some Mon Calamari, looking in these holograms and seeing their king. The Imperial officer that's there is like, I'm warning you. And then the Mon Calamari just swarm them. And then this comic ends with, the usual gang in the Millennium Falcon thinking, oh, this is all for nothing. And then Chewie makes a noise and Han's like, what? And he picks up his little headset thing and says that Urtia must have broadcast the message. And Leia's like, well, the timing's all wrong. They're doing it with no preparation and no support. You know what happens next? The Empire sends its fleet. And that's where that comic ends. So we are now on to the final comic. So a big space battle begins between the Mon Calamari and the Imperial fleet, and Urtia calls rebels as a backup because Leia and the Millennium Falcon and things, they can't actually call it because their comms are being jammed by their Star Destroyers, but the comms on Mon Cala are strong enough they can't be jammed by a ship, so they call for the rebels as backup. So then, Admiral Ackbar arrives with the Rebellion fleet, and Leia and Luke are in the Falcon shooting at things while Han and Chewie are flying it, and then they're getting tailed by something, or by a TIE fighter, and then Wedge shoots the TIE fighter, tailing the Falcon. Anytime Wedge is in it just makes me happy. So while this is all going on, Ackbar has a plan, and he asks to be put through to a ship called the Aurora Flare. He speaks to Captain Leela aboard, and, they have some niceties saying it's an honour to serve, and Ackbar says, I can only ask you to volunteer. This is far from certain. You may die for nothing. And Leela says, I volunteered when I clubbed a stormtrooper to death with his own helmet, sir. What do you need us to do? And Ackbar says, you honour me. I wish there were the time to know one another, Leela. This is what you must do. Then the Mon Calamari ship ejects escape pods, and the ship itself heads towards the Star Destroyer. The Imperial officer on the Star Destroyer orders the TIE fighters to shoot the escape pods first, and as the TIE fighters go to do that, the Millennium Falcon lines up very nicely and manages to destroy all of the TIE fighters, saving the escape pods. Tunga is surprised that the Imperials were going straight for the escape pods, and he's like, wow, they go for the escape pods, really? And Han is like, yeah, you'll find that working as a rebel really gives you a different perspective. Turns out the Empire are not the nice guys, because obviously, shooting defenseless escape pods of a ship is pretty horrendous. So then the Mon Cala ship is getting closer and closer to the Star Destroyer, and the Imperial officer on board is questioning what exactly was on this ship before the mutiny happened. And he's told by his colleague that the ship was full of coaxium, and he's like, well, wait, stop shooting at it. And before he can finish his sentence, the ship explodes. So the ship explodes, and it basically destroys the majority of this Imperial Star Destroyer. It's got this big hole in it now, and assuming that most of the crew on there are dead. And it confirms all of the rebels like, well, the blockade's been breached, quick. And they all make the jump to hyperspace and escape. I just want to clarify as well, coaxium, that was in Solo, a Star Wars story. It's just hyperspace fuel, basically. And it's obviously very explosive. Then it's got this nice panel of Urtia. He's down on Mon Cala, and he says to his aquatic droid, it's kind of like a C-3PO, but if it was kind of Mon Calamari in a way. And he says, you can leave. And the droid says, no, sir, you've been good to me, I'll stay. And then the remaining Imperial ships do a barrage onto Mon Cala, and you see this big laser beam hit exactly where Urtia was and explode, so he's gone. It then cuts to the Rebellion. The Millennium Falcon drops off Tunga to the Cosmotanic Steppes, which you actually see in the last arc of the Vader comics that I tackled a while ago, and in the first few Dr. Aphra comics too. And he walks away saying, I can't wait to tell people the story, the mutiny on Mon Cala, and things, which is quite funny, although he yells out the mutiny on Mon Cala, but the collection of these is the mutiny at Mon Cala. I presume that was intentional, but still. And then the last few pages of the comic is basically, it says months later on Mako Tower, which is where the temporary rebel base is currently at. And Leia is speaking with Trios, and they're talking about, how well they've done and how Leia couldn't have done it without Trios, and Trios is really, great to see that Leia's happy about all this sort of stuff. And there's going to be a launch party in 30 minutes. So Leia says, well, I'll meet you down there and stuff. And then Trios by herself, she goes to a terminal, puts in an identification code, and then contacts Darth Vader and says, they're here, they expect nothing. And that is where that comic ends, and that is where that arc ends. So the next issue, which I'll tackle in several weeks' time, just so you know what the name of that arc is called, it's called Hope Dies. And it's a pretty intense arc from what I can remember of it. So yeah, look forward to that. So yeah, guys, that is the end of this episode, relatively. The only other things to add on this, next week is going to be probably the Darth Vader, Target Vader comics. So essentially it's a mini-series, I think there's 6 issues, and it's Target Vader. And it's when some bounty hunters get hired to take out Darth Vader. One of the bounty hunters is Baylert Valance. He was first shown in Canon in the Han Solo Imperial Cadet comics, which I think I tackled on episode 10 or something. And he is the main protagonist of the Bounty Hunters series, which is ongoing at the moment. And Boba Fett's been in it, and there's going to be this big old crossover with all of the running comics at the moment, with an issue that Charles Soule has written. So I'm quite excited about that. I haven't decided how soon I'm going to jump into the ongoing series, because there's the High Republic ones, the Bounty Hunter ones, the second batch of Aphra ones, the third batch of Darth Vader ones, and the second batch of Star Wars ones, as well as Bounty Hunters and things. So I'll see about that. Obviously, once I finish this Target Vader one, I'll only have the miniseries, the Kanan miniseries to tackle, but that is 12 issues, so I'll probably do that in 2 batches. And aside from that, I've got 2 more editions of the Age of series to do, which is going to be the Age of Resistance and Villains and Heroes. So really, in 2 months' time, I'll have done every mini-series in the Marvel comic canon, as well as all of the Age of comics as well. And then once I've done that, I'll obviously have the main run of Star Wars comics still going and the main run of Dr. Aphra comics going. And then what I'm probably going to do is have the Darth Vader second run of comics. I'll probably start that up because that is an absolutely incredible comic run. It's probably my favourite run of all Star Wars comics. I'm very, very excited to get into those. And that is 25 issues. So, I know the last arc is 7 issues. So I think it's probably going to be 4 or 5 maybe arcs within that. So that'll be 4 or 5 months of things. And then hopefully by that sort of point, I will have caught up with the main run of Star Wars and the Dr. Aphra comics too. And then after that, I'll be a bit more free with what I can do. So I'll be able to do some of the more new comics and things. I'll be able to tackle some of the other ongoing series like the Poe Dameron series, which I have not yet actually touched. And then I can, as I said, embark on some of the newer things, the High Republic comics, the Dr. Aphra, Bounty Hunters, all those sorts of other things. So if you guys let me know if you've got any recommendations of what you want me to tackle sort of going forward in the canon. I am at some point going to tackle the Tales from Vader's Castle comics as well. They're with IDW instead of Marvel, but they're still canon and things. They're just aimed at generally a younger audience, but Cavan Scott has written those, so that's quite exciting. In addition to that, for Star Wars stuff, I have got some very exciting things planned. On this coming Sunday, so the day after this has been released, I am chatting with a gentleman who was in The Mandalorian, so I'm quite excited to speak with him. I will say, it's not Pedro Pascal, I'm afraid. There's no one quite that big, but they're a really, really cool person. They're very interesting, and I've heard them on a couple of other podcasts, and they're just a really interesting individual. I'm having them with another friend of mine on there. I'll probably be releasing that on this show. I haven't fully decided because I've got that one. I've then got 2 Star Wars YouTubers that I'm hoping to speak with. And then I've also got another Star Wars author that I'm hoping to speak with in sort of May time, I think. And then I've also got a gentleman who is involved with, he created the puppet of Silicious Crumb, which is the weird little Kowakian monkey lizard in Jabba's palace in episode 6 that cackles a lot. So there's a lot of people involved with Star Wars that I'm going to be speaking with. I would probably say the Salicious Crom one won't be quite as Star Wars centric as the other ones because he's done a lot of other stuff. So that'll probably be on Genuine Chit-Chat. But the other ones I will be releasing on this feed. I haven't fully decided if they'll be as well as normal episodes or instead of. I might be cheeky and do instead of because it just saves me a lot of time then having to do, the Genuine Chit-Chat podcast and the Star Wars podcast and Patreon and stuff. But also, guys, for number 50, for episode 50, which is only in 2 weeks' time, I think, or, if I release the episode that I'm doing with the gentleman on Sunday, I'm going to have to make sure it gets released at the same time I release it on Genuine Chit-Chat. So whenever I figure out these things, because I've got quite a few things coming up, I may or may not do episode 50. This is the thing, I'm getting a bit mixed up. So the next week's one is going to be Target Vader, that's definite. Then the week after that will probably be episode 50. Now for episode 50, I am going to be doing another Q&A episode. I haven't decided if Megan's going to join me or not. I think probably not, but we'll see what kind of questions we get. But I'll write on Twitter and Instagram and lots of the other sort of places I have social media. But if you want to start getting your questions in, please email me or contact me on any of the usual social media places at Genuine Chit-Chat. Send me questions to do with Star Wars. They can either be what is my favourite blank or do I recommend blank, or they can be actual questions like, why is blah 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 not blah blah blah? Why is this thing in that? Where can I find every single comic that mentions Darth Vader? Like all of these sorts of questions. Please send them my way. As I said, I'm going to reach out on social media and whatnot. But you can contact me directly by direct message, or you can email me at StarWarsComicsInCanon@outlook.com. And send in the Star Wars questions and I'll read them out on the show. Please tell me if you want me to read out. If you do it on social media, I will read out your Twitter handle or your name, whichever you'd prefer. And if you message them to me via email, please tell me how you'd want me to address you, because I don't want to read out your email on the podcast, because it's quite a private thing for a lot of people. But yeah, I'm going to be doing a Q&A episode for episode 50. Next week's going to be Target Vader. And then in the next couple months, there's going to be several podcasts I'm going to be releasing on this, which are going to be interviews with people involved with Star Wars in some way. So I'm very, very excited about that. It's an exciting time for the future. And I'm also going to plug in, check out my other show, Genuine Chit-Chat, where I have, conversations with many of the people in the Comics in Motion family. You can now listen to Star Wars Comics in Canon on YouTube as well as on the feed of Comics in Motion on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts and all those places. YouTube, you get to see the artwork. That's basically the only difference. And as of recording this, I'm about 4 episodes behind, I think, on YouTube. So in the next week or two, I should be completely caught up. And then every Saturday, I'll be releasing new episodes on there at the same time that I release this one that you're potentially listening to on Spotify and things. So the Genuine Chit-Chat, YouTube, and the other thing is my Patreon. I do Star Wars Comics in Canon completely for free, and I also do Genuine Chit-Chat completely for free. And I understand that, a lot of people who listen to this content don't want to pay for things. That's completely fine. I'm not going to put up a paywall or anything like that. But obviously buying every Star Wars comic and, spending several hours reading them, doing notes and research and all these sorts of other things, it takes a lot of time. And I've currently got 4 Patreons, or 4 patrons who have been supporting me, and I'm incredibly thankful to each and every one of them. They mean the world to me. If you do want to go to patreon.com/genuine chit-chat. You can check out the various tiers I've got, but for clarity, if you pay as little as £2 or $3 a month, you get access to the podcast feed, which will have all episodes of Genuine Chit-Chat that are in 2 parts. I then put them together in 1 part, so you basically get access to part 2 a week early, and you get them unsplit, so you don't have to wait and things. In addition, I will occasionally upload episodes early on there. The Light of the Jedi book review that I did last week, I released that on my Patreon feed. I think it was a day or 2 early, just because I managed to finish editing it and stuff earlier. And also, there's a new show on there called Afterthoughts that I do with my girlfriend Megan. I'm aiming to release 2 episodes a week, and essentially, at the moment, we're doing a Star Wars rewatch and watching various other things. So if you go on there right now, you don't have to make an account, you don't have to pay anything. There are already 2 free Afterthoughts things on there. So one of them is Star Wars The Phantom Menace, and I think that's about 20 minutes long, and the other one is The Witcher Series 1, and that's about 10 minutes long. So we just talk about our thoughts on them. Me and Megan do not always agree. We have, Megan generally doesn't like things as much as I do, but there's certain things that I definitely don't like as much as she does. Some of the other things I've released on there has been the director's cut of the Watchmen film. We've done WandaVision, spoiler free. We've recently watched a documentary called Murder Among the Mormons. That's going to be on there. I just put up How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days because me and Megan watched that. So that's a bit of fun too. We've got the Spider-Man films set up to go. We're doing, as I said, a whole rewatch of the Star Wars films. I think I've uploaded Revenge of the Sith. I have yet to upload Solo. So at the moment, I'm trying to release one Star Wars Afterthoughts a week, as well as one other film a week. So each week you're getting approximately half an hour or so of 20 minutes to half an hour of extra content. So that means that really you're getting about 2-ish hours of additional content for about £2 a month or $3, and you're supporting the show, which means the absolute world to me, because at the moment it costs me money to do this show and Genuine Chit-Chat, for podcast hosting, for Genuine Chit-Chat, having Zoom meetings and things, and obviously paying for these Star Wars comics because I like to have them physically. So there's a lot of different things there which obviously I do them for free. It's a passion project and I don't want to force anyone to pay me for them. But if you feel like you enjoy the show, if you feel like it's reinvigorated your love of Star Wars and it's a really good guide to comics, and you don't want to pay for Patreon and extra content, that is completely fine. But another way you can support the show is by reviewing Comics in Motion on iTunes, or reviewing Genuine Chit-Chat on iTunes. That helps as well. But also sharing on social media. That's the big thing. If you use social media and you have friends or family or anything, whether you share it on your feed and things so everyone you know can see it, or if you send it to individual people, this is a show that I just love doing, and I want more and more people to consume it, because I've had so many of you reach out to me and say, I love the show, it's reignited my love of Star Wars. Oh, I didn't know how to get into the comics, but listening to your show, it's a really good guide and things. That means the world to me. So reaching out to me, telling me how good of a job I'm doing and giving me a nice little pat on the head, that means the world to me. Sharing on social media, telling your friends and family about that means the world to me, as does reviewing on iTunes and things like that. Make sure you check out all the other shows on Comics in Motion, because they are all absolutely fantastic, and I listen to all of them before I listen to almost any other podcast, because they're just that good. And I just want to say thank you so much, guys, for any of you who are Patreons, or if you're just standard listeners of the show, it still means the absolute world to me. So I want to say thank you so much, guys. And also, I forgot to mention that I appeared on the 20th Century Geek podcast recently, so I've included a link to that in the description. Go check that out, where I talk about desert island comics. I choose 3 comics that I would take with me to a desert island, and they're all Star Wars comics. 2 are Darth Vader comics I have not yet tackled on this show, and 1 is a C-3PO comic that I tackled in episode 4, I think, or something like that, really early on. So get to have a redo of the 3PO comic and an in-depth look in that, as well as look into 2 of the Darth Vader comics that, for me, make the series so good. So check out 20th Century Geek. He's like a family. He's part of the Comics in Motion family, even if his show isn't on the feed itself. But we're all family. We're all a tribe. We're all doing crazy things. And there's just loads of great content around for all of us. So, as always, guys, thank you so much for listening, and may the Force be with you.